So this is some of the sort of basic, what goes into caregiving? Well, many things, and obviously situation dependent. For example, caregiving for someone with dementia can be very importantly different from caregiving for someone who, say, has an infection or a more time-limited issue. But much of the time you will be hitting on these things called ADLs, or activities of daily living. And these are official designations. So we'll talk about these in formal sense, just so we can understand the job here, the role. But just so you know, these ADLs are important in the insurance world. So if someone needs help in all ADLs, they then may qualify for home care, for example. So there are technical repercussions to this, to the need for ADLs, to the degree of dependency. So just know that much. There's some significance in the insurance plane, but for the work we're talking about at home, these are just sort of the mechanics, a way of understanding the mechanics. So there's bathing, of course, and this is maybe one of the most important. I think those of us who have been patients or dealt with illness, one of the great indignities is that we end up sort of sitting in our own filth. And bathing, turns out, across cultures, across time, is a beloved, basic, fundamental human social engagement, but also a basic station for ourselves. So it is not a small thing. This is not just to take care of body odor per se. I mean, this is a big, big deal. It's tending to the body, cleaning the body, in that way respecting and revering the body. So very, very important work. Dressing, probably don't need to describe too much of that, but there too, I mean, think of these things in terms of beyond just function, but think of them in qualitative terms. You can imagine how any of us feel like when I've got my best duds on, or when I've showered and cleaned up, it just puts me in a different state. They're not small stuff. And it can also be when people are feeling, our patients, people we're caring for, feel kind of removed from so much of the daily life. It can be really powerful to kind of dress up for the day, even if you go nowhere and are seen by no one. So don't underestimate it. Eating, nutrition, getting food prepared in the mouth or in the feeding tube or in the vein of the person we're caring for. Again, basic sustenance here. Transferring and moving. Well, let me step back for a second to eating. Another thing to kind of be aware of for ourselves as caregivers is how charged the eating thing can be. Very often people who are dealing with illness are not in a position, can't eat, sometimes mechanically. Oftentimes their appetite is suffering. Their sense of taste can be altered by chemotherapy and other things, radiation therapy, infection, etc. And so while eating is, nutrition, nutrients is considered so fundamental to life, well, it can be very distressing when the person you're trying to care for, won't eat, can't eat. And I've seen so many families sort of really lose it around this point because it's primal. And so something to be aware of. And there are times in the course of an illness where really putting food into somebody is not a good idea. We could talk more about that, but that's something to note here for ourselves. But next, transferring and moving, well, this is where a lot of injuries happen. So caregiving in some ways can be, this is overwrought, but I was gonna say a dangerous endeavor. It can be very physically taxing. This is where it can be very, very helpful to get some training from a physical therapist, etc. Find a way to move well with someone, to lift someone well, to use your legs instead of your back, and how to use someone's weight to generate momentum, etc. This is something to be very, very leery and careful of as caregivers. This is where so many of our injuries are sustained. And just know there are techniques to helping someone transfer and move. And sometimes that may require getting durable medical equipment like a Hoyer lift to actually mechanically lift someone out of the bed, like with a crane. So this runs a gamut on this one. This one is noted, most noteworthy here, again, for our self-care. Be careful to not injure ourselves. Toileting, going to the bathroom, basic, essential. Of course. And something toileting can be difficult because it often requires transferring. Sometimes a bedpan can do the trick, but transferring to a bedside commode, it's a cheap piece of durable medical equipment, which takes some getting used to, but actually can be a wonderful thing when trying to get someone out of the bed. ambulate or roll into a bathroom, transfer to a toilet, etc. That is a lot of action there. So bedside commodes can be a godsend. But one way or another, you're going to be helping to move someone. So that gets tricky. And that also means sometimes caregivers accidentally or subconsciously happy to forget about the person's need for toileting, especially the person's not communicative and they're not asking for it. It can go by the wayside. And this is where people can live with days of constipation. That's a big, big deal. That can be really upsetting to a patient physically. That can cause shortness of breath, pain, nausea, delirium even. So this is something to really watch ourselves and not accidentally or casually brush aside. Related, of course, is continence and helping someone deal with incontinence. And incontinence is very common, whether urinary or bowels. So these are technically the ADLs. Again, some significance for the insurance world, but for our purposes, this is just a way to understand the physical job of caregiving.